Hello, and welcome to today's Environment and Energy Leader webinar, sponsored by Intellect Technologies, a global leader in the development of EHS and quality software. My name is Jessica Hunt, and on behalf of the entire team at E&E Leader, I welcome you to What to Do Differently for Environment and Sustainability Success. Questions specific to today's presentation, as well as any technical issues, may be submitted through the Q&A widget that is already open on your screen. We just ask that before sending us questions regarding sound or video quality that you do follow the help instructions located in the help widget at the bottom of your console. We encourage everybody who is on with us today to communicate with other attendees using the attendee chat widget. I sent a message in there earlier, so hopefully you all saw that. Let us know where you are calling in from and why you decided to join today's presentation. During today's event, attendees will have the opportunity to hear perspectives from subject matter experts as they go through customer examples and practitioner insights to achieve sustainability success. We have set aside time for a Q&A session at the conclusion of the presentation. If we do not get a chance to answer your specific question before the top of the hour, a member of the team will follow up with you as soon as possible. We do appreciate those who have already submitted questions prior to the start of today's event, as well as those who are submitting questions already today. Additionally, E&E Leader will be providing all attendees with a certificate of attendance as long as they meet specific viewing criteria. And on another note, Intellect will be providing a copy of today's slide deck for all attendees, as well as additional resources post-live event. And at this point, I am going to turn the presentation over to Charlie and Fraser, and I want to thank them again. It's been a pleasure getting ready for this webinar with both of you, as well as the rest of your team at Intellect. And I will be rejoining everybody for the Q&A session.
Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Charlie Knapp, of course, and I am speaking to you from sunny Denver, Colorado. And I'm very happy to be joined today by my colleague, Fraser MacArthur. Hello, Fraser.
Hey, Charlie. So Fraser MacArthur, Principal Product Solution Consultant, calling in from rainy Toronto, Canada. Been with Intellect for about 8 years, and the last few years been focusing on ESG. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Fraser. So we're going to cover 3 primary topics today. First, we're going to talk about why today's technology is insufficient for tomorrow's challenges. And second, the main thing that we have talked about in our promotions of this webinar is what to do differently. And it isn't all about spending money on new technology. So we'll give you some ideas that will help you with your day-to-day job, however you're approaching it today. So finally, we're going to talk about next steps to help you in your journey of maturing your ESG business processes and practices. So those are the 3 key things that we'll be sharing. As mentioned, we're going to send some information after the webinar. There'll be follow-up links for you to continue your learning and dive deeper. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce the main thing that we want to address in today's presentation, the main challenge. So the main challenge that brings us together is that sustainability management is hard. We hear about this from many different customers all around the world, and we hear such details such as, I spend too much time wrangling data across teams, across silos, and all of this is on top of my day job. We also hear commonly, my staff need guidance on best practices. And if that wasn't enough of a challenge, we also hear often about new reporting requirements, in particular for European customers, such as how will I fulfill CSRD, but also we hear from Canadian business leaders about carbon tax accounting and reducing corporate carbon tax bills. We also hear some from US business leaders about the pending US Securities and Exchange Commission regulations and what will actually get the job done to meet those 500 pages worth of new regulations. So those are some of the key things we hear from people about their experience today in doing or managing sustainability efforts. These challenges come down to three underlying challenges, and we're going to talk about these briefly in a set of drill down slides. So first is the data variety and volume. Second is about the complexity of calculations. And then finally about evolving rules and regulations. So first up that I want to address is the challenge of data variety and volume. So on the left, you see that many businesses are using tools such as Excel to deal with all the various sources of information. There are also some portion who are still using paper. Some of the latest survey findings that I've seen show that a typical professional dealing with environmental health and safety and ESG deals with roughly 10 to 12 computer systems or information sources in their day-to-day activities. That's quite a number. There's a trend going on in the IT world of consolidating systems, reducing the number of systems needed to get a particular job done. But we're finding that among EHS and ESG professionals that there's a wide variety of systems that need to be used. So one of the challenges then is about finding all that information, finding it for environmental or E, finding it for social or S, and finding it for G for governance. Pulling all that information together, validating it, and then performing any needed calculations, such as figuring out what your greenhouse gas emissions were for a given quantity of building natural gas heating consumption. So there's a variety of organizations that publish factors to use in performing those calculations. So that's an additional complexity, is the data variety isn't just about transactions or about quantities of energy used, for example, or tons of air emissions, but it's also about the kinds of calculations needed to run against that kind of data. So then a couple of other things I'll mention on this slide before we move on is about the need to actually have auditable reports. So some businesses start off with just using or creating spreadsheets where you plug in the number and it gets reformatted to a useful reporting output, but it doesn't necessarily show you any kind of audible path about where the data came from, how the data was manipulated, how it changed over time, such as change in emission factor or a change in energy usage monthly. And then one other factor to keep in mind is the concept of materiality. So you're probably well aware, but in my way of talking about materiality, I say it's figuring out what matters most. Figuring out what's most material to your business in non-financial areas, such as, is it your electric utility energy consumption, or is it other factors? And that, of course, can vary by your industry compared to other industries, vary from location to location. So it's not always easy to figure out, and all that makes it a challenge then to figure out what to do with the data. Second is, we've already touched a little bit on this, but let's go deeper on calculations. So calculations for ESG span three scopes, and this is just for the environmental part of ESG. So these calculations are complicated and they involve acquiring data from a number of different sources. So for one thing, there's looking at what actually took place on site at your facilities. There's also taking a look at data that you can acquire from offsite providers. So for example, let's say that I am an ESG manager with Tim Hortons Donuts. I love them when I'm in Canada. And let's say I'm responsible for Tim Hortons ESG for the province of Ontario. So Tim Hortons is retail. It's not a large emitter, but Tim Hortons has a lot of locations. And so small numbers multiplied by many locations starts to add up to something significant. and acquiring information for each of those retail locations about what was our energy consumption, what kinds of energy, and then running the needed calculations can get to be a lot of legwork. And that's why we said a few slides back that one of the key problems that business managers and line level staff experience in doing their day jobs with ESG is about wrangling data, that all of this gets to be very laborious. As if all that wasn't enough, what is changing is the environment of reporting. So you're familiar with voluntary disclosures driven by some common global goals, and then more recently some reporting frameworks. Those are voluntary, and the world is changing. So for example, there are the new EU regulations having to do with sustainability. There are also pending regulations from the International Accounting Board. There's country-specific regulations such as carbon tax accounting and tax fees for the country of Canada and potentially for other countries. So the point here is that the world is changing from, gee, it would be nice to be able to say, here's what we are doing for sustainability, to we need to have metrics. We need to report metrics. We need to report metrics in the ways that are mandated. And we need to have these metrics in ways that are defensible and auditable, that will stand up to scrutiny, and where if there is a charge, like a US airline was recently in the last week sued for a claim of greenwashing, you want to be able to actually produce the metrics that show how your business is actually doing. So the world is changing again from voluntary disclosures to mandatory reporting. One of the things you may have noticed in this vein is more and more headlines talking about the burden to actually do something. And we're hearing about this in particular from our European customers who are feeling the most immediate heat about they need to put in place systems now to be ready to start tracking in January and then reporting at the end of 2024. So when I talk to customers and when we survey them, we find that there's a variety of perspectives on whether the people we survey think their organization has the right technology or not. And on average, we find that about half of the respondents that we survey feel that the organization has the right technology. On the one hand, that's great, but on the other hand, it does bring to my mind the question of, is their technology really right? Now, one reason why I ask that is when we take a look at the data, we find that 3/4 or 72% of survey respondents are using multiple technologies. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we find that on average, that I should say the median is that professionals are using 10 to 12 systems in their daily ESG responsibilities. So that's a lot of hunting around. That's a lot of data wrangling to bring it all together in ways that make sense. We also have found in surveys that we have run that 42%, almost half, say that their current technology hinders more than it helps. So there is technology there. It may even seem right, but it's a hindrance to getting the right answers quickly. And we also find that paper still exists in many ESG reporting efforts. So going beyond Excel spreadsheets, there's still a lot of paper wrangling to be done. So one takeaway from this is that you probably have heard a fair bit over the last couple of years about digitizing or digitalizing your environmental and ESG information. That's good, but it's really just a starting point. So what's needed is to then take the myriad of spreadsheets and spreadsheet versions and other tools and bring them all together into ways that actually help you be more productive. So what would help you do things differently and do things better? I'm going to hand it off to Fraser, who's got some great insights to share.
Great, thanks, Charlie. So in speaking with many successful ESG leaders and specialists over the years, there are three things that they typically have in common in terms of what they're doing with their data. And these three things are what you need to be thinking about to be successful in your own ESG journey. And that's really aggregate, automate, and anticipate. And kind of going into each one in a little more detail before we kind of drill down shortly. When we think of aggregate, it's really gathering and the aggregation of data across the business. So whether that's consolidating the data of different operational teams, such as HR, legal, health and safety, et cetera, and or consolidating data coming from disparate systems into a single source of truth. Now, this allows you to truly see ESG across the business and is a foundation of any successful ESG solution. In terms of automate, so automate not only time-consuming and complex calculations, but the collection of data itself, be it automating the collection requests of data on a recurring basis or integration with other systems. If the single source of truth already exists, don't duplicate it, integrate it. And then finally, anticipate. Use your past ESG performance data to better predict the future and define any necessary objectives and targets to then track toward. Now, to expand on aggregated data, combining all your ESG and EHS data is much more valuable than having isolated silos of data. According to Verdantix, an independent research and advisory firm, 49% of EHS respondents indicated that their operational duties have shifted beyond basic compliance data collection to actually assisting in defining ESG strategies and actions. And I can tell you firsthand from experience, this is definitely the case. As increased reporting requirements fall onto EHS professionals, the ability to collect high quality ESG data will become a critical capability, if not already. Now, today, aggregating sustainability data is messy, it can be time consuming, and it's an addition to the day job of any staff. Because of fragmented sources, workflows, and responsibilities, this can interfere with their day-to-day work, which is a challenge to buy-in and satisfaction. In addition to manual data entry, importing data electronically reduces efforts and errors while also increasing the accuracy and availability of your data. Importing can be done via a simple drag and drop of one or more files, or even by real-time API integration. The more that can be automated, the better for efficiency and data cleanliness. Now, ESG really requires enterprise or across the business knowledge. This includes data from all enterprise locations, from corporate headquarters right down to the site or field level, or even suppliers. This information crosses teams and the various operations of the business. Isolated silos of information here are not your friends. For the sake of time, we're going to focus most of the rest of this webinar on more of the environmental aspects. Now, calculations tend to be time-consuming. They can vary in their approaches and adoption and even precision across the organization. An ideal situation would be to be able to apply multiple data-driven calculations predefined as needed to each data point. We also recommend approaches that deliver insights to you, insights through dynamic, interactive dashboards from an ESG and sustainability management perspective, rather than relying on static spreadsheets or reports. Intellex's corporate reporting for ESG bundles in the power of enterprise-grade Power BI with interactive canned reports to provide you with deep ESG insight at your business and across all levels of your organization. Now, one key need in ESG is the ability to identify double materiality. So double materiality takes in the concept of materiality in sustainability reporting and takes it one step further. It aims to identify both ESG-related factors and risks that can impact your business, and this could be financially, and it's also how your business activities impact society and the environment in general. For example, our Intellect software partner, Datamran, is the only software analytics platform in the world that identifies and monitors external risks and opportunities, including ESG. So utilizing proprietary AI, Datamran can help prioritize and monitor over 400 risks that matter mostly for your industry and for your locations of business. Now, this patented technology offers near real-time updates and insights for any of your double materiality goals. And it's using this information, you can start setting enterprise-wide goals, objectives, and targets, and track towards those and minimize your impact to business and the impact to society and the environment. Now, leveraging your aggregated data and your embedded Power BI, forecasts can give you insight into future performance towards goals, which enables you to take proactive action. If you see something trending negatively, you can adjust course prior to it being too late. Now, progress reviews are a valuable tool to understand progress and as well take action. And when your sustainability management system aggregates and automates operations, you have the ability to review and adjust mid-cycle, such as a monthly and quarterly review rather than annually alone. Now, at Intelex, we really aim to help companies at any point in their ESG journey. So some companies are just looking to start their ESG programs, while others have been at this for years. Whether you need assistance in aggregating your ESG data from various parts of the business, or you're looking to do materiality assessments and anticipate the future, Intelex can help. I'd like to ask you to think about where your company sits on this continuum and what the next level is. And wouldn't it be useful if a quick survey could help clarifying your standing? As part of this presentation, we will share a link to a quick, useful materiality survey. And with that, I will hand things back to Charlie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fraser. I appreciate that. I would just add on to what you said on this chart here, that one useful way to think about things is to think about a roadmap. Put a timeline to what you would do to grow your business's ESG maturity. So you might start off with the immediate need of stepping up how you track your metrics and how you create your disclosure reports. But then maybe 6 months or a year out, you would take on actively working to improve your performance, such as your progress towards net zero. And then maybe in another time period, you take on the next step of reducing risks proactively. So it's not just a matter of saying what could be next, but you could get some real value out of this by putting a timeline to those next steps. With that, I'd like to switch gears and share with you a little bit about one of our customers in London who has used a number of software packages from Intelex to help them with the full range of environmental and health and safety and sustainability reporting. And so I'm going to briefly introduce to you a video where they're going to show and tell about how they've made performance improvements. The key thing for you to know in my mind, one is that Corey has actually been able to take the information they use to reduce workplace hazards. They've radically cut the amount of time they spend wrangling data. And with all of that, they're able to improve their business performance. So let me hand this back and let's watch a video of Corey.
All right, I'm going to get ready to play it for the audience.
The money and time we spend just managing the information, analysing it, and just producing reports and sharing them has massively reduced. We're still as compliant as we ever were, we're just compliant faster and more accurately. So Corey is one of the United Kingdom's leading waste management companies. We're based primarily in London. We've been around for 125 years. And for the last 30 or 40 years, our core business has been moving waste from West London using our unique river infrastructure to our energy from waste processing facility in Belvedere in southeast London. From a sustainability perspective, our business model is fantastic. There's 730,000 tonnes of black bag waste that doesn't get sent to landfill as a result of our energy from waste facility in Belvedere processing that waste. In doing so, we also recover energy, 500 gigawatt hours per year, which equates to the electricity that's used in 160,000 homes. What we liked about Intelex was the fact that they shared our values. The cultures between the two companies was very similar. In fact, they encouraged us to become system administrators and to have a very proactive role in the configuration of the tool. and we really liked the fact that we would be owners of our processes and that they would support us in digitizing it.
So essentially, Intellex is a database which is easy to populate, it's easy to navigate, and it sends alerts and notifications to people that need to see that information so that everyone sees what they need to see at the same time.
So we took a two-phase approach to implementation. The first part of it was digitizing our existing processes. Like any company that has been around for a long time, there were embedded ways of doing things, and one of the things we had to do was persuade people to give up things that they become comfortable doing and to learn to do them in a new way.
Initially, when we spoke about bringing Intellex on board, there was a little bit of tension in terms of the change to the business, but then as Intellex was implemented and we started to use it, it then became a very useful tool, and they are now very much on board.
And then the second phase really is where the payoff happens. That's where you show people the results of the work that they've done, the improvements that are made in timeliness and accuracy, when they can see dashboards that are generated in real time and they can start to respond to and react and intervene in a timely manner using an evidence base that makes them more confident that those decisions are wise decisions that they've made.
We've got some of our sites that there's observations all day long, they're just putting things on there all the time, and it's almost like a competition now. They're so pleased with putting bits and pieces on there that it's really doing well.
There have been two positive impacts as a result of implementing Intellex across Cori. The first one is that my team can see what's happening in real time. That's incredibly valuable in terms of an internal efficiency in my team.
Intellex has definitely made my working life easier and better. It cuts that workload down massively to a half hour's job from sort of 7 days, so it's a massive improvement for me.
The second part of it is we can share that information back with the frontline operatives as well, and that means that the benefit to the whole company isn't just felt within my team, it's felt within the company as a whole. Fundamentally, I measure success by a reduction in serious incidents and accidents. I'm really happy to report that over the last 2 years we've seen a sustained reduction in our all-injury frequency rate and our lost time injury frequency rate as well. So the future is very exciting. Cori and Intellex are working together on a number of projects that are around integrating data sets from a number of different sources. We're very excited about that because that will enrich the data sets and give us new avenues and opportunities for making safety interventions and ultimately to improve both the safety culture and the safety performance of our sites.
It's back to you guys now.
Thank you very much. So we spoke at the beginning of this webcast about 3 different business needs, about the need to aggregate, to automate, and anticipate. And by stepping up what you do there, you're able to achieve greater business performance. So when you use the right technology for today and for the needs of tomorrow, you'll take care of those 3 kinds of problems. So for example, with Cori, they said, we have targets to hit net zero carbon. It's important to have reliable and accurate data sets. So you actually have those accurate data sets when you aggregate. The second is about automating. And Cermak, another customer of ours, said that we replaced manual spreadsheets and sticky notes. We now have a much stronger structure for reporting, and we can pull statistics. So you're automating the aggregation and you're automating the viewing of all those numbers. Finally, it's about anticipating. And so that's not only about forecasting that we showed you a minute ago, but it's also about having a partner that is taking a look at what is coming and is helping to step up the tooling that you have to deal with new reporting and management needs. So when you have the right technology for today and for tomorrow, you deal with aggregating, automating, and anticipating. So what would you do to take what we talked about today and to dive deeper? We're going to share with you after the webinar the PDF of this slide deck, and these links will be hot links. They'll take you first to this global research report where we asked ESG and EHS professionals worldwide about their use of technology and about how it's overcoming the key challenges they face. Second is about benchmarking your programs against businesses in your industry. So that we've hear from many customers is very useful, is to have an idea of where they stand compared to peers. And finally, we'll also share with you a link if you want to know more about what Intellect's corporate reporting for ESG does. So with that, we're going to now switch gears and start addressing some of the questions that have been coming in.
Yes, and thank you both for this wonderful amount of information. The video was really nice to see. It's always nice to hear from a partner on how your solutions are helping them. And before we jump into some of the earlier questions, this one came through in a different format, but what additional internal changes did Corey have to make after implementing the systems at first?
That is a good question. And I am not that familiar with the changes that they have made, but we do have a case study at our website that may give you some more information on the Corey case.
Great. No, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And for the attendees, you can click on the links that are in the resource section of your attendee console, and they will direct you to Intellect's website. And as Charlie mentioned, they will be sending out specific links after today's event as well. All right, Fraser, I'm going to start or move on to you now. This person is looking to improve their organization's maturity when it comes to ESG. So where do they start?
So in maturity or materiality?
This says maturity, but we could talk about materiality as well.
Okay, well, let me start with maturity. I think in terms of most of the clients that I'm working with and the customers today, it really begins with getting your handle on scope 1 and scope 2. That's what the majority of people are doing this year, and also towards the end of this year, starting to strategize around scope 3. What are the 15 GHG protocol categories that they're going to report to? Some of the biggest problems that organizations are struggling with is really how to get the data that they need to put into an ESG management solution, which is another reason why scope 3 is kind of something they're strategizing about, but thinking of implementing in the coming years. And as well, the social and governance side, it's a little more straightforward than when you start thinking about scope 1 and scope 2. So typically, get scope 1, scope 2 in place, and then start bringing in that social governance and again, strategizing about what you're going to do with scope 3. Now, another important aspect of that is materiality. It's really going to be telling you what you need to focus on. So a lot of organizations can bring in consultants. It can take a better part of a year with the polling of stakeholders and looking at industry, various operations of your business and where you're conducting that business. It can be expensive. What we have as Intellects is an exclusive partnership with a company called Datamran, and they have patented AI that combs the internet for any mention of any company. And this includes things like 10Ks, hard laws, soft laws, social media, CSRs, et cetera. And this offers a quick and easy way to gauge how the world views your organization without having to do that big stakeholder engagement or hiring of a consultant. And as well, it also gives you the dynamic capabilities to run not just a materiality assessment once, but you can run them periodically, quarterly, and see how those material topics are trending. And again, that's going to form the foundation of any ESG program that you put in place at any organization.
I'm sorry about that. My mic was still on mute. And Charlie, did you have anything to add to Fraser's comments?
I totally agree. That was really a solid summary.
Excellent. All right, Fraser, I am going to stick with you for this next question, and then Charlie, I will move over and get your opinion on something else. The proposed CSRD is requiring taggable data. Is this something that you're already doing? Is this something that you see in the pipeline down the road? Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so Intelex is, paying very close attention to CSRD or SEC in the US. So obviously, we need a solution that's going to meet the needs of those regulatory frameworks. So yes, tagging is part of the solution where, again, you can tag indicators to CSRD, you can tag them to SEC, GRI, TCFD, what have you. And once you have the data in the system, it's very easy to then roll that data up, aggregate it, look at it from 2022, 2023, and extract that data very easily out of the system.
Which is extremely beneficial. Now, in your experience, have you found that some of your clients are utilizing more than one framework when they're analyzing their data?
100%. In my opinion, it's kind of like the Wild West out there right now. There's 200 plus frameworks right now. New ones are popping up every day. I think over the coming years, we are going to see a consolidation of them, but definitely many organizations are probably the top ones that pop into my mind are GRI, SASB, TCFD, CDP, GRESB. So usually they're reporting to a handful of those, including their own additional CSR.
Got it. Yes. And I agree. It does seem like more and more frameworks are popping up. It's going to be when is enough. And it probably is at this point, and it's probably going to be best for everybody if these frameworks are consolidated, but that is to be determined, right? All righty. And now, Charlie, let me go over to you. Is there a sustainability guide or, a check sheet, a one sheet that's available for companies to use as a reference?
Well, yes. At the intelex.com website, we have a number of resources that include some checklists that would help step you through your process of getting better organized and improving your performance. The first one of those that I would point you to is the benchmark that we mentioned previously. So that's a great starting point to quickly take a look at the key factors about your business's maturity and how you compare with your peers.
Excellent. And do you find, and I know Fraser mentioned this a little while ago, do you find that most of the companies you're working with really do want to measure themselves against like companies or, really put an emphasis on that information and data?
Yes. And one of the reasons why I say that is that when we have a gathering of customers, such as at user conferences, that's a question we often hear. So we often ask, well, what are my peers doing in this industry? Or who's doing this the best and what are they doing? So that really comes down to benchmarking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And, if something is working for a company that is in the same industry, why not, take their advice, take their experience instead of reinventing the wheel. So it's always good to share. Not everyone used to share information that goes across private, public, government agencies, but I think that those times have definitely started to shift. Charlie, I am going to stay with you. And we talked about this actually a little bit before jumping on live today, but this company has been using spreadsheets for ESG efforts. Why isn't that good enough? And I know both of you touched and alluded to this earlier in the presentation, but it's also hard to get people to make that financial jump. Change is not always the easiest for individuals, let alone companies. So why can't we just use spreadsheets?
Well, first I would say that spreadsheets are a good start in making the leap from the era of paper. But as you think about your own day-to-day work with spreadsheets, you may find, as I do, that sometimes there's a hunt to find now which is the spreadsheet that has what I'm after. Sometimes I have a hunt of which is the version that I want. And especially if you're bringing together similar spreadsheets from multiple people. So which has the latest data or which rows out of the spreadsheets have the latest data. So it can be a real data management problem trying to figure out the right pieces. Another factor is not just the data wrangling, it's also the part about how do you reuse that data? So in an era where we have multiple reporting frameworks and multiple regulatory disclosure reports and actual requirements, one data point may need to be reused or acted upon multiple different ways. And so spreadsheets are not that well adapted for the idea of store it once and use it many different ways. So what comes with sticking to spreadsheets is a lot of extra labor to take each data point and reuse it as needed for multiple purposes. So those are just a few of the challenges that can actually be running up the costs and the reporting efforts for your company by sticking to seemingly low cost or free spreadsheets.
Computer is lagging a little bit there. Sorry about that. No, I mean, that definitely makes sense. So when you are talking to stakeholders or that, the decision makers of the company that are going to make the investment in this technology, what besides cost are, some of the biggest barriers that you, as, working for Intellects, trying to share the benefits of this solution with clients. So what are some of the complications or, the barriers to getting stakeholder buy-in?
Well, for me, one of the things that I hear commonly is about limited budgets for something that isn't necessarily a revenue driver or an obvious cost cutter. So it comes down to a business case. One of the things that is changing that for many organizations is that as new regulatory mandates are coming down the pipeline, it's making the pain of getting numbers wrong be greater. So for example, I mentioned that one of the US airlines was just sued last week on charges of greenwashing that claimed environmental performance improvements towards net zero allegedly are more marketing speak than actual fact. And so one of the things here is that there's an increasing need to be able to put together believable metrics that are defensible and clear. Another thought too is that one thing to think about is about the cost of blind spots. If you don't really know how one facility is comparing to another, for example, what is that costing in lost opportunities or increased costs because one division or one location is lagging compared to other parts of the company? So all of those are the kinds of factors I would think about that would go into a business case that would say that this isn't just a matter of spending money on somebody's software, but this is a matter of improving the return on investment that we get from our sustainability efforts. Fraser, what would you like to add?
I think sustainability, ESG data is becoming just as important as financial information. Customers are demanding it of their suppliers. They want to make sure that they're doing business with a supplier that's sustainable and respects all things ESG. So whether it's using that information for bidding process or just renewing partnerships, it's becoming critical to the functioning of any organization worldwide.
Now, and I couldn't agree more with you. And I know that the UK is obviously ahead of North America in terms of climate goals, ESG, all of that, and the fact that there are companies tying ESG compensation to hitting certain ESG metrics. So, that's another thing. Do you foresee that coming, happening in the United States in the next few years?
Well, I'm Canadian, but I suspect that is the case.
Yes, I know. In Canada, yes. It's definitely something that we have talked about, and the need to have the accurate data. Human error is something that we see, and I'm sure you've seen tremendously in working with companies who did use spreadsheets before. Was it kind of eye-opening to certain clients, just how much human error might have gone into the data that they were reporting before while they were just using spreadsheets?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, again, at the end of the day, they want investor grade quality data in the system. So building in many checks and balances that your typical spreadsheet does not have, whether that's business validation on data entry, if some kind of business rule is triggered to force them to enter comments or justify it, or attach copies of invoices. So having that first sanity check when the data is entered to avoid mistakes, and then also utilizing things like workflow where you get additional eyes on the data. So maybe flowing to a group for validation, and then post-validation flowing to a group for final approval. So things that a management system provides that your spreadsheets don't.
Exactly. Charlie, did you have anything to add to that before I move on?
No, I'm ready to move on. Thanks.
Okay, excellent. All right. This question is about specifically AI. So do you see the influence of AI impacting the ESG and obviously the software field? We're seeing more AI being utilized in various different forms these days.
Personally, I think AI is going to be very pervasive. Intellect does own AI technology. We're integrating it into products as we speak. Datamran, I think, is a glowing example of AI capabilities, specifically in the realm of ESG. Again, there's no other way you could possibly run a materiality assessment in a matter of minutes that they can. I mean, you're typically looking at probably a good year of FTE of effort to run a materiality. So I think we're going to see a lot of exciting things coming from AI, and that's more or less probably going to be the future of a lot of the ESG capabilities.
That seems to be the consensus from other industry leaders that I have talked to. Charlie, would you agree?
Yes, I would. So one of the kinds of uses for AI, in addition to materiality, is for scanning regulations and be able to convert regulatory text into structured parameters. Those parameters can then be acted upon by an environmental or ESG management system to help guide actions. And that really takes me to talking about the next possible area of AI use in the future. So I envision much more use of AI in the future to not only predict, but also to prescribe. And we see this in a number of other business areas of technology, such as the CRM arena, where, for example, if you're on a telephone call with a contact center, some of the more advanced contact centers actually have agent screen pops telling an agent in real time, slow down, sound like you care. It's AI listening in real time to what's being said and the tempo. Now, how does that apply to environmental? Well, the idea here is that you could have prescriptive messages going out from the AI system saying, we see that your carbon usage, or excuse me, your carbon emissions are running this bit ahead. What takes this beyond just rule-based alerts and triggers is to actually have a system that's scanning large amounts of data, looking for not only what is outside of the machine programmed rules or what the machine has learned as rules, to have the machine recommend what to do next. So those are a few of the things that I see AI being used even more. And I see a question, by the way, about is there one particular AI that seems to be getting the widespread play? No, so such as some of the Google tools, ChatGPT, I don't really see any of those really being dominant at the moment. At the moment, I really see it being purpose-built along the lines of what we discussed, such as purpose-built for materiality or purpose-built for scanning regulations, which Intellect has right now. So it's really the combination of having the right kind of rules already programmed into the system as a starting point, and also training that system with the right kind of data. So when it comes to AI, much of its success is really all about the data, having large enough, comprehensive enough data sets for the system to learn on its own. And that's a little of what I see in the future for AI for environmental.
Which is so unbelievably interesting. And to go along with that is AI is not going to be able to use data from just spreadsheets. There's no way there's going to be enough data there, correct? So, really having a comprehensive system that has the ability to collect data, to analyze data in multifacets throughout the organization is what, companies are going to need to have in order to utilize AI, which ultimately is going to help them become more sustainable, help them, really report on their return on investment. So it's really, it's a really interesting thing that we are going to be seeing in the future. This person has a question that is actually specific to Intellex. And Fraser, you mentioned, we talked a little bit about what's coming down in the pipeline for Intellex. Can you briefly talk about any other initiatives that, Intellex is looking forward to in the next, 6 months to a year, or anything that is going to be coming down the pipeline?
Right. At a high level, ESG is a major investment area for Intellex. It has been over the last 2 years, and it's going to be for the foreseeable future as well. I think one of the, to talk, some of the biggest things we're going to be doing is bringing in that big data, those millions of data points that would be required for use through AI, and also that seamless integration to speak to the automation capabilities that we were talking about today, along with the aggregation. So I don't want to be too specific, but there's some very exciting things coming in the very near future. And Charlie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I kind of had a feeling that's where the answer was going to go. But in terms of talking about data, and I know we are coming up close to the top of the hour, is there ever such a thing as too much data? Do you work with clients that have such a broad, have a broad set of goals that when you sit down with them and you start to analyze the data and the systems that you have put in place, is it just too much for them to be focusing on at one time?
I mean, in my experience, ESG is a new concept to many companies. So some people they're just taking their first steps on the journey. Yeah, they have very large wish lists. They want to run before they walk. So I think it is important to kind of take that step back, realize what's important to the business, whether that's starting with a materiality assessment, seeing what your competitors are doing, see what's being done in the industry. But yes, start with something that you can bite off and then grow into the future. And again, focus scope 1, scope 2, keep it simple, then strategize about what you're doing scope 3 in the coming years.
No, definitely. And then Charlie, did you have anything to add about scopes 1, 2, or 3?
I'd like to actually bring up the thought that ESG maturity really isn't a one and done effort where you work on it one time and then you're done, then you move on, project's completed. What we are talking about is about finding the things to focus on that matter most, taking care of those, and then you can move on to other areas. So, for example, scope 1 and scope 2 are perfect starting points. They're understandable. When we translate that into regulatory reporting requirements, there still can be a lot of data. For example, the CSRD, the chair of the EU Commission publishing the regulations, said that for the typical company that has European operations that needs to report, they're going to have roughly about 300 different data items that need to be reported. And they've identified a possible universe of 1,000 different kinds of data that businesses might need to report on, depending on what's material to their own business. But the average one is going to have 300 data points. No matter how you look at it, that's a lot of data. So I would do as we've been talking about, figure out what matters most and start there with the thought of then having project roadmaps and for that matter, technology deployment roadmaps where you look at stepping up and maturing what you're doing over, say, a 2 or 3 or 4 year window. Do a great job with the first year and move on to the next.
No, that sounds like a great plan. Now, in terms of the size of companies that both of you have worked with, what is and I don't want to say typical size because, businesses come in all shapes and sizes, but in your experience, how beneficial has this platform been for, those smaller businesses as opposed to the larger corporations?
I think ESG is relevant to all businesses right now. I have worked from, I don't want to say mom and pop shops, but small businesses all the way up through the enterprise, large global organizations. It's not just important to publicly traded companies, private traded companies are coming to us, private companies are coming to us as well, because again, kind of going back to their customers are expecting this of them. So it's really taking off, and I think it's relevant to all businesses out there.
No, I definitely couldn't agree with you more there. Well, before I close it up, I'd like to just, get some last closing remarks from Fraser, from you and Charlie. So Fraser, why don't you start and then turn it over to Charlie?
Well, I mean, I think ESG is a journey. You need to start somewhere. Focus on, again, what your competitors are doing, what's being done in the industry, and as Charlie mentioned, kind of grow into it. I think there's many exciting things to come. We're just at the beginning of this. It's a little hairy out there at the moment, but I think things will settle down. And I appreciate your time today, and I'll pass it back to Charlie.
I agree. It's a matter of identifying what's going to matter most over time, and it will change over time. So you don't need to, in effect, boil the ocean trying to get it all done once in a massive project, or what we used to call in the IT world a runaway project, but instead just figure out chunks of work that you can take on to step up your game and produce business results. So thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar.
Yep, no, thank you both. And I think it's good that this ESG can be overwhelming. All of the information that comes around with ESG, with things that regulations are changing, policies are changing, but starting small and really figuring out and honing in on what is important to your company and what are the goals of the stakeholders within the company. So I think that's a great way, to leave this event, to know that just start, right? Just start. Don't try to be too overwhelmed. You'll get there. You'll get there as a company. So again, Fraser and Charlie, thank you for your time today and and thank you for the rest of your team at Intelex for the work that you put into the event. We always enjoy working with the team at Intelex. And just a reminder, this event will be available on demand for attendees to come back and view in about 3 hours or so. It will also be available on Intelex's platform, as well as E&E Leaders YouTube account to go back and view again. We appreciate everyone who was able to join us live, and to those who are watching on demand, we hope you enjoyed today's event as well. And at this point, I am gonna conclude today's webinar, and thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.